Tokyo is now the most populated metropolitan area in the world and is the capital of Japan, the third largest economy measured by GDP. But growth and wealth are not straight lines. This city was destroyed twice in the last 100 years. The first time in 1923 in the context of the Great Kanto earthquake, and again by Allied bombing raids during World War II. What happened afterward is regarded as Japan's miracle. But in fact, there isn't magic nor miracles in nations' development. Let's decode this economy. The history of Tokyo stretches back 400 years. The city was originally named Edo, and it was not until the Meiji era that Edo was enacted capital of the country. Before this, the emperor resided in Kyoto, which was the former capital of Japan. When the Tokugawa shogunate ended and imperial rule was restored, the emperor moved to Edo, which is renamed Tokyo, becoming the capital of Japan. Prior to the 20th century, Japan's economy relied heavily on fish, rice, and porcelain for export, but was already on its way to industrialization, as Emperor Meiji had started a political and economic reform that brought prosperity to the country. This reform, commonly known as the Meiji Restoration, was a coup d'etat that resulted in the dissolution of Japan's feudal system and the restoration of the imperial system. The primary economic goal of the government, which directed the development of strategic industries, was to establish a modern network of transportation and communications. The first railroad was built in 1872, and by 1890, the country had more than 1,400 miles. Moreover, telegraph lines linked all major cities by 1880. By the early 20th century, the goals of the Meiji Restoration had been largely accomplished. Japan was well on its way to becoming a modern industrialized country, and Tokyo was the home of 2.2 million inhabitants. A growing population of citizens began to lead consumer lifestyles, educational standards were highly improved, and the country was subject to a process of westernization in institutional terms. After Japan's victory in the wars against China in 1895 and Russia in 1905, the country gained respect in the eyes of the world, appearing for the first time on the global scene as a major world power. In September 1923, Tokyo was devastated by the Great Kanto earthquake. Over 140,000 people were reported dead or missing, and 300,000 houses were destroyed. 75% of all buildings in the city were severely damaged. The damage done by the earthquake was gradually repaired with time and delayed the process of growth, which continued up to World War II. There is no need to explain what happened in World War II. Japan was atomically devastated once again. Much of Tokyo had been destroyed by the bombings, and by October 1945, the population had fallen to 3.4 million, half its level in 1940. But this tragedy preceded what was Japan's economic boom that would end up with the country being the world's second largest economy by 1991. There are two main factors that explain Japan's rapid recovery. First, during the US intervention period, the exchange rate was set at 360 yen to $1, which made Japanese exports, mostly textiles, attractive to American consumers. And secondly, the remaining infrastructure in heavy industry was greatly used in the Korean War, in which the US helped Japanese firms fulfill procurement contracts, and damaged American equipment was repaired in Japan with Japanese labor. Japan served as both a logistics base and a repair depot. The US economy boomed after the end of World War II, and this allowed more Japanese imports because it feared that keeping Japan poor would lead to a communist takeover. Sustained prosperity and high annual growth rates, which averaged 10% from 1955 to 60 and later climbed to more than 13%, changed all sectors of Japanese life. The development of a consumer economy in Japan was possible because of US consumption. Both countries grew trading with one another. In 1965, Japan's nominal GDP was estimated at just over $91 billion. 15 years later, in 1980, the nominal GDP had soared to a record $1 trillion. In this context, Tokyo had grown more than any other city in the country, becoming a hub for financial enterprises, and was described as one of the 3 command centers for the world economy, along with New York City and London. The city took large steps in economic growth as a result of its increasingly global economic activity and the emergence of information society. Tokyo became one of the world's most active major cities, featuring attractions such as cutting-edge technology, information, culture, and fashion, as well as a high level of public safety. From 1986 onwards, land and stock prices spiraled upwards, a phenomenon known as the bubble economy. The Japanese asset price bubble was fueled by an overly loose monetary policy and overconfidence in asset and stock prices. In early 1992, this price bubble burst, and Japan's economy stagnated. The bursting of the Japanese asset price bubble contributed to what many call the lost decade, which in fact is still a problem. Specifically, the Nikkei index reached an all-time high of 40,000 points in 1990 and is currently at 22,000 points. Property prices in Tokyo are 30% lower than those of the early 90s, and the country's population has been decreasing for the last 10 years. Japan is currently what economists describe as a zombie economy. These economies are characterized by low growth rates, a never-ending need of debt to achieve that mild growth, and Japan now has stock of debt that represents 250% of its GDP. Inefficient companies, sometimes too big to fail, and that survive thanks to cheap governmental credit lines, and finally, aging population. Tokyo is one of the most modern cities in the world, lives up to its fame, and is the financial center of Asia. Though it has been in a stagnation phase for long, as the country is also submerged in zombification, Japan has demonstrated everyone that the lack of natural resources not necessarily means poverty. Its modern economy based on industrial goods and services has amazed economists of all kinds. As Nobel Prize winner Simon Kuznets says, Japan is a unique sort of country, meaning Japan had passed at least 2 times the process of becoming a developed nation, from nothing to greatness inside of a century, twice.